Okay, very good. Hi, welcome to Your Real, Your Ideal. Thanks for joining us today for our conversation. I am excited today. We're talking about aging with dignity. That's for old people. That's the title of our episode. And I love that we're doing it today because I'm visiting my mother in Las Vegas. And so I'm recording from there. And I've been watching her all week and just thinking, oh, so many good nuggets here. So, how are you today, Sandy?
Amy, I am great. And you're Vegas. I do like doing this on video because, first of all, it's good to have a conversation. We can see each other, but it looks
Right.
absolutely gorgeous there. And I like that my parents live in Arizona, so I'm seeing some of her art and her rocks in the backyard, and it makes me want COVID to be gone so I
Right.
can go visit my parents. So, uh,
Right. Yeah. And you know what? She lives on a golf course. So in Vegas, you don't see a lot of green, but in her backyard, there is some
you
green back there, which
love
is
it.
nice.
Love it. And it's sunny
Yes.
here. And then
Today,
not
go
that
for
this
it.
is the topic, but I have not traveled since March. My last
Yeah.
trip was actually a family reunion right before St. Patrick's Day, and I'm going to San Jose for 2 days for work. And I'm really thrilled. It's been forever, and probably since I was in college, since I've had such a long period of time that I've done no travel. So
Right. Same here. My last trip was the end of February. And aside from driving to get my kids from college, but
right.
like a real fun trip into February. And I will say it was interesting to fly because I flew here.
How was it?
Um,
Did you feel
it
safe?
was good. Yeah. We very lots of space. It was Southwest and direct flight, and everybody was wearing their masks. So it
Nobody in the
felt,
middle seat, right? Isn't that what Southwest does? Nobody in the middle seat.
I had the whole row to myself.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it was, and I don't know if that was intentional or if that was just because there weren't very many people on the flight, but it
Right.
was great. It was uneventful. And I was like, all right, made it through.
Isn't
Low
it
crowd.
funny that these days uneventful is a very important word for us?
Right. That's so true. I love that. So these days, speaking of these days, as we're aging, let's talk a little bit about aging with dignity because we are on that journey. And we're kind of the sandwich generation of we have our parents and we have us and then we have our children. So we're kind of doing all juggling all those roles of the mother, daughter, everything.
So I have a question for you, Amy, and this kind of
Yeah.
gets back to the beginning of our title, That's for Old People. Would your mom think that our topic today was about her, and does she consider herself in the population of old people?
Um, Good question. Yes. Yeah. So because, and I'm just going to say yes, because I broached the topic with her and I said, we're talking about aging with dignity. Do you have any advice? so she was, and so she was, I think she completely recognizes that she's, she's aging. I mean, I think we all do. And it's that grace that we're doing it with and that acceptance that and intentionally taking care of yourself and things like that. So anyway, yes, I
And I
do think.
love her attitude, but I'd have to tell you that I hear more, and from people, I pulled up a message that somebody had sent to me too, that there is that's not for me, that's for old people. I had an aunt that we were caring for that we were suggesting assisted living. And then I said, in the meantime, there's Meals on Wheels. She's like, why would I do that? That's not for me. I'm not going to take away from old people. That's for old people. And she's dead serious, you know.
And how old is she?
She's actually in her late 70s, but she has health
Oh,
issues.
yeah,
Okay.
but
But she has health issues and she
yeah,
really needs these services and she
yeah,
qualifies, and I get that, back to, and I have brought up to my father-in-law one time, I think it was Garrett who said, don't they have a senior center or something there? He's like, why would I go there? That's for my mom. His mom has long been deceased, but he's like,
right,
that's not for me. You know, that's for my mom. And it hadn't dawned on him, or he hadn't thought about that he was the same age or past that his mother was when she went there. And
Right,
so
right.
there is this whole thing too that I deal with quite a bit with family members. Oh, and so the friend, the story there was it was actually on book recommendations, which I would tell you, I would highly recommend reading. This is one of my top 5 favorite books of all time, Being Mortal,
Being mortal.
Atul
Oh,
Gawande. And really what it is about, and it's not just aging, because aging, you're obviously going to die. It's about being mortal.
yeah,
It's also about chronic illness, but it's
right,
really taking charge. And there's a lot of dignity in this book, and there's a lot of realism about how hard we try to not be mortal, but we are. So accepting that, and I call it a book about living instead of a book about dying. Anyway, I had recommended that she read the book, and her note back to me is, she said, this really makes me think about what I want the end of my life, and also I need to have these conversations with my parents about their lives now. She said, I put my
right.
grandma in assisted living this past year, and she is constantly saying, I want to go home. I don't belong with all these old people. My grandma is 93.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
But my mom
I
tells the
so
story
I
about,
love.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no,
Well,
go
I was
ahead.
gonna say I love that she said, "I want to start having these conversations now with
Right.
her parents," because I think that's the key with everything, even the conversations I'm having with my children about my aging, um, and continuing on and having those conversations early before you have to make those big decisions. And my mom was talking about, she got new glasses, and she was talking about she had to have them to pass her driving test. And the lady was telling her she has to have a restriction on her driver's license now that she needs glasses. And so she's like, I've never had the restriction before, but I'm like, Mom, I've had a restriction my whole life that I have to wear glasses. So it's not that's not exactly about aging. That's just about our eyesight. And so anyway, it's just interesting that
It's
the
such a hard
hurdles.
conversation about dying.
Yeah,
You know, we're all going to do it. If there are two things we all have in common, every human is, we are all born and we will all die. We, everybody,
right.
every
And
last
pay
one of
tax.
us.
Isn't it birth, death, and taxes?
Yeah, pretty much. Other than some people, I think they eventually got caught though. But back to taxes, you know, one of the hardest conversations was estate planning. People hated to do estate planning, to plan around their death. And, you know,
Right,
about the medical things that go with it, the thing with estate
right,
planning is you're almost assuming that you're going to have a natural death, which everybody, you know, you think you want this natural, nobody wants anybody to die young or suddenly, but it happens, right?
right,
And we
right.
cannot control that. But the tough part about aging and being in the, you know, the upper part of the parent of the sandwich group is, you've now become, your mortality is right in front of you every day, because
Oh,
you now know that that time is going down, and there's no unknowns. You've passed the, you know, all the scares of dying young, dying in childbirth, you know, and but it's there and it's on the mind all the time. um, and is it better to pretend it's not there and just enjoy life, or constantly prepare for it? Because I do see both too. And then the great part of
right,
the in between is have a conversation of what you want that to look like for you.
right. And I think there's finding that balance between being prepared and making sure your finances are prepared, and everybody that needs to know has access to your passwords. You know what I mean? Like all
Right?
the logistical stuff. If something happens to you, who can close all your accounts and take care of everything. So there's the piece of planning, but there's also that piece of um, enjoying the time that you have and
Living.
making sure it's quality time. And that comes with being healthy, like trying to maintain your health, and also being active, and not just waiting for it for the end to come, you know.
And I think the other thing with that, Amy, is its interactions, because the other thing that I found, well, it's interesting because looking back, I was thinking a lot about watching aging, and it's family members are the ones that are the closest that you have the most insight because you watch. And so I remember as a child, my great grandmother, and I remember her being kind of crabby and not really nice to my grandmother, but my grandmother taking care of and observing her taking care of my grandmother. And then
Yeah.
I watched my parents care for their parents with their siblings, right? With and being very, and I was much more engaged in that because I was a young adult at the time. And then my mom, her funny was in. I'm not going to see. I'm not going to swear on this one. There is the acronym FOP, FOP, which means effing old people, and
Yeah.
she heard somebody say, "Oh, that fop is taking forever." Now, they weren't talking about her, but she looked and it was somebody of the same age. And she said it was the first time it dawned on her that she was the old people, like it was always them. And she had realized that that generation had pretty much died off. And now her generation were the fops.
They
And
were
that was
so
her light bulb
they were,
back to
yeah,
that's for old people. She's looking around saying, oh, and then she just realized, she's like, that generation is gone.
right,
Blink 10 years, 20 years later, and that's us. But watching all
right,
that now, I'm in those shoes. And we have my father in law who lives with us, and he's 79. And he's got tons of spirit. But like with anything, the body, we always talk about it, the body ages, it has a shelf life.
right,
It's like a car with a lot of mileage. And it's to have all those things interplay together about, back to healthcare and how you feel versus what you do, the interactions you have, and then
right,
companionship. My parents have each other, and they're very active, but they have each other too. And not
yeah,
everybody has somebody, their spouse or significant other with them, which makes it difficult. They have their kids, but
right,
we also live in a country where children don't have their parents typically live with them. That is not the norm. That's the norm in other countries, but not in ours. So a lot of people are home by themselves.
right. You know, my mom was talking just because I'm here, and so I'm I'm listening to her a lot, um, talking about this aging and relationships and stuff like that. And my dad passed away 16 years ago, so she's been on her own. But in the last 4 years, 4 years ago, she moved into this community that's a 55 and older community.
Mhm.
And that was a bit of a game changer for her because they have a community center, they have activities, they have a gym, they have all of this stuff that's geared for 55 and older. There's people out walking all the time. There's all
Right.
sorts of things to keep everybody engaged. If they want to, there's an opportunity to do it. And she's talked about how many good friends she has in her neighborhood. And I got to go to lunch with some of them yesterday, and they're just lovely, but they come from all over the country. So they're all very interesting and different, but they're all on they're all in this age group together, and they're on the journey and doing well.
That's
So
awesome. But don't you think relationships mean so much back? So she might not have a significant other, but she has all these friendships and they keep each other active and
yes,
young at heart. And it's being valued, it's being valued by others. Sitting at home alone does not make you feel valued,
right,
and
right.
good for her.
Very true. Very true. And just having the normalized access to stuff like just here's an example. I was reading an article and it was talking about the gym, and it was talking about a lady who was a member of a gym that had all age groups. And she said in the locker room, the when women were changing, the younger ones were covering themselves. There was a lot of conversations about problems and issues, and stuff like that. Well, she switched to a gym where it was geared towards older people and retired. It was geared towards retired. And she said the locker room was a completely different feeling. She said women were wearing their granny panties, walking around not covering themselves, total self acceptance. And then that they were also talking about happy stuff. Like they weren't contemplating, you know, trouble with their children or whatever. They were talking about what a beautiful day it was outside. And there was a lot of, it was just a different sense of happiness in the locker room, which I was like, isn't that an um, interesting concept? And I took myself back to my younger self and being in the gym locker room. And, uh, I remember having childcare issues at the gym, and one of my child kids was a biter, and I was in tears, and I was like, I remember having all this angst and juggling and things to do, and I and then I can see the flip side of it, and just being self-accepting.
And that's what I appreciate with my mother is she can see things with these eyes that have been in my footsteps before. And I don't need it as much as I do now, but I sure did when I was the age of you with,
Right.
I had blurters, not biters. They talked a lot. Or they
One
created
biter.
havoc. But believe me, I got called too. But she would put things in perspective.
Yeah.
I always say, it was my mom that they would oftentimes babysit either my mom or my mom and dad when we went on trips, and I had a long list of here's everything, here's all the practices, here's piano lessons, here's art, here's school. Then you have to do spelling words. And day one, she looked at my kids and she's like, "Boys, do you really like all this stuff?" And they're like, no. She said, "Can we just throw it away and do what we feel like?" And she threw she told me later, she said, "I threw that damn list away on day two." And she said, if
Sounds
they
like
get kicked
my
off of
mom would.
the team, or if if they're not the most artistic thing, I will take full blame. And they ended up getting out a sewing machine and sewing. They went I mean, they just spontaneously spent their time. She made sure, I think it was in the summer, so there was no school, but she basically said, "I threw that damn list away on day two."
Yeah. That's a good. That's
But it
good.
was
But
her, it
then
was her chill. She's just like, okay, my daughter's being her own worst enemy, and I want to enjoy my grandkids. And she would have been the one walking around in her underwear at the gym and not even caring about it.
and there is something special about that relationship between grandparents and grandkids, especially when you take the parent out of the mix. They get to really get to know each other.
Which I think is a big thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Being a grandparent or caring, having an active role in your grandchildren's or other people's lives, back to feeling the word dignity. Part of dignity, one thing I hear a lot from my father in law is he will say, "I need a reason to get up in the morning." Okay. And
Oh,
so it might be
yeah,
great that I make all the meals, I do all the grocery shopping, and Garrett does all that, but we take care of everything in the house. But he's like, "I gotta have something to do." And
right,
we don't, when the grandson was here, now he's 17, but when he could run him to the airport, help out, have conversations with him, that was really meaningful because he has a lot of knowledge to share. And part of being valued is to be able to share that, and to be able to have that mutual value back and forth. And that grandchild relationship is a great way to do that. And I see a lot
right,
of older people that are very involved in their grandchildren that get a lot of the same satisfaction that your mom might, being there with her friends and her
right.
activity partners. But that human interaction is so key. And I worried so much, Amy, during this COVID. uh, I think so different. My father-in-law had us, and we did fine, but I mean, that's only so much. He missed the friendships he had, being able to go to the library. He's the kind of person that everywhere you go, he would learn somebody's name and know the person at the checkout, or so
Right.
not going out, he lost those relationships too. My parents had each other, but then my mom missed her gym friends, and dad going out to garage sales or people, things, people he would see at his different stops. COVID was such a reminder back to this topic being high, is aging with dignity. And what does that mean? And, can you ever get dignity being alone? Can you?
Right. Right. There has to be, good question. Can you get dignity being alone? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I think having the connection with other people probably helps validate all the stuff that you're experiencing and feeling and being able to share it with someone. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah.
it's hard when you're, hmm,
I
I
use the
like that.
word dignity. The word dignity, when I worked for the large, I was part of the big large primary care startup that had to do with, majority was caring for the elderly. We also employed a lot of people, and the word dignity kept coming up in the vocabulary. Treating people with dignity, a lot of being mortal, asking what they wanted, not just taking them to doctor's appointments after doctor's appointments, but taking the time to say, what do you want? What do you want your life to look like, rather than just shuffling 5 different solutions, or things that might actually kill them because of the frailness of their bodies. You really want to do that. And then dignity in how you treated people if the job didn't work out, or we needed to, it was just treating people with dignity. And to me, the word dignity is appreciating their human value, and them
Right.
knowing that they're human, that their value as a human, they're valuable, that treating them with respect. And that means talking to them, not making eye contact with the person that took care of them, not dismissing them. That's easy to do. It happens a lot. They don't hear as well, they don't always
Right.
answer the questions, but that's not treating them with dignity by not asking them the question. Firing
You
somebody
know,
without saying, without having a conversation, it's okay for things not to work out, but that word dignity really held to me there, and I go back to it a lot. Maybe it goes back to your phrase, Amy, when you talk about giving people unjudgmental regard. Come on, what's the better? There's a better word for it. That you give them, you don't assume bad, you assume good. uh,
positive intentions. Yeah, the
Positive.
positive intentions. Well, and it brought me to your happiness factor, because part of that value cubed, one of the values is being valued by others. And if you take that piece away from someone, then if that's a zero, if you're putting a zero in their cube, then there's going to be very low happiness value.
I'm going to give you're reminding me of a book, and actually Garrett read this too. We love this book. um, she was actually really big on Facebook. The book is called Driving Miss Norma, and it started as a Facebook post where people followed her, but what had happened is her husband had passed away, and she had ovarian cancer, and very quiet, very sweet woman, and her only son and his wife, and they had a big poodle dog. The son and his wife traveled around the country in an RV, and they went to help mom. Mom still had the house, and they went to the doctor, and he turned to mom when the doctor said, well, we can do all this and radiation, blah, 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 blah. And he turned to his mother and he said, Mom, do you really want to do this? Or do you just want to get in our RV with us and we'll go wherever you want to go and travel wherever you want to travel? And she said, I don't want the treatment. I want to go in the RV with the dog and you too. And for a year, they went to national parks. They visited maybe her hometown. And then this was all on Facebook. And you can follow this woman until her dying day. They were going and seeing the sunrises, sunsets, and she didn't do, and she was in, for when it got to the end, they managed the pain, but she was in far less pain than she would have been through in her frail body, going through the chemotherapy, going through all the treatments, and laying in hospital beds and probably dying from it anyway. And it likely probably wouldn't have extended her life by much of anything, but it said she saw the world.
Right. And she got to spend time with them.
Right.
And the time and the conversations and the, instead of just being put in a hospital and and not feeling good from all the treatments. And what that's an amazing story. I'm gonna have to find that
And even
because
look
that's
on Facebook, because I was following them on Facebook, and then the book is really good because the husband and wife flipped chapters. And so he would go back to childhood. She would see it. You know, women can see uh, healthcare and aging maybe a little bit different than the male. The book was really good. Garrett loved the book too and has recommended it to other people. So following it just on Facebook is interesting, but the fact that how often, Amy, do we go to doctor's appointments and the doctor says, and nothing, I'm not saying anything bad about the doctor. That's how they are trained, especially in
right,
America. How they are trained is what do you do to promote the read being mortal? How do we lengthen life? We're going to try everything, but you know, the good doctors that have the time will take the step back and say, or you could do this. Here's pros and cons of both. What do you want to do? But so often
exactly,
do we sit back and say, okay, so here's the treatment plan. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. Almost everybody's going to go to, of course, we've got to treat the cancer. And for that
right,
son to say, Mom, what do you want to do? And when
right.
he asked her, she didn't even hesitate. She said, let's get the heck out of here. I'm going in the RV.
And what that's awesome that he had that insight to accept whatever her choice was instead of, we need to go for the most aggressive treatment so that it was like because you could have the opposite where somebody's really passionate wanting you to pursue really aggressive treatment and to take a step back and ask the question of what she really wanted is really that's awesome. I love that story.
And you know, one thing I do go back to dignity and trying to, it's so easy because I think we do that innately as parents. It's so easy to try to drive the ship because we do see the elderly as being more vulnerable, so they need us as their advocates. But then it's
Right,
to be able to have the discretion to take that back and let them have a voice at the same time and be able to
yeah,
know the difference, because sometimes they don't even know what they're advocating. It might not be safe, right? And so it's easy to kind of take over those conversations without asking them. But I always think about back to the aunt that was aging. She was having some issues. She doesn't have kids, and so she has lots of siblings and nieces and nephews, but I was closest in proximity and probably in relationship too because we live by each other. And she was having some health issues, and when she came out of those, she had to make some decisions. And I actually took her to Dairy Queen. I thought, I'm just going to shut up and say, just ask her, what is it that you want? You know, what are you looking for? What will make you happy? And I asked her that, and without any hesitation, she said, well, I think it really comes down to two things. I want enough finances. I just want enough money so I don't have to worry. Health, doesn't everybody want good health? Because if I have good health, then people ask me to do things and I can do things. And
right.
she said, in relationships, it's all about relationships. I just want to be by people. I want to see my family and I want to be by the people I love. And then she's like, that's all I need. And I think about that all the time with her, and it really applies to any human, right? I mean, aren't those
Right.
innate
Yes.
needs?
Yes. It was health, financial security,
Yep,
and relationships.
relationships. Those were, and it was without hesitation. And I have heard that, you know, from my father-in-law. I hear that with my parents, and then living life, you know. But a lot of the living life is around it's around health and relationships because they're able to do things that they enjoy. And it's a very sad day when they can't do certain things that they enjoy anymore. And I'm with them. My heart goes out, you know, that certain things have to be retired. But then
Right.
I'm sure, like your mom, you know, it's helping finding something to replace that, because there's a lot of things, you know, there could be other things that can be joyful. But, you know, it's a mental thing too when you have to give up something you've done your whole life, whether it be golf, whether it be running, you know,
Because of your physical
physical
ability. That,
limitations.
yeah. And I will say, um, mom was having trouble with her sciatic nerve for a while. And she loves to travel. Like I give my mom tons, she's got an adventurous spirit. But that was really limiting how much she was enjoying her traveling, because walking around and sitting in an airplane a long time. So she's been going to the gym now more than what she used to. And she said it has been a game changer, and she feels better. She's stronger. She's doing more. And she's in her late 70s. So part of that is, if you can, even if you're at that point and you start seeing yourself being weaker and having you can shift gears and
Right.
step it up, start doing things so that you do feel better, and you can keep doing the things that you love.
Back to the granddaughter and trying to either help them be creative or let them be creative and finding new things to find joy or new ways to work around things. So my mother would be an example. COVID, Arizona, none of their grandkids live anywhere near close now. At one point, they had a couple grandkids that were about an hour and a half away, but now they're nowhere close. But my
Yeah.
mom, and I've talked about this before, she missed her friends at Silver Sneakers, and we started doing Zoom sessions with Silver Sneakers with my 26-year-old niece, me, and my mom. And like clockwork, Amy, this started, I think my mom has, she keeps meticulous calendars. I think she said we started this in early April, and we don't miss. I mean, maybe on occasion, one of us can't make it to one, but I mean, it might be once every 3 weeks, and 3 times a week we have these. And I'll tell you, the dialogue between grandmother and granddaughter, and we just share life. What are you making for dinner? Whether it's recipes, whether it's, and back to my mom being valued, she, granddaughter sharing what she's doing, mom talking about this, or, we're working out, but the conversations and the learnings from different generations. And my mom is valued because we love to hear about what she's doing or her project or what did she do when she was 30. And I mean, we might
Right.
talk about bad periods. We might talk about how cooking is different and what's in this nutritional value, but it's a valued reciprocal relationship. And we figured it out with Zoom, but you've got to also take the time to do it. And on top of it is the 25-year-old or 26-year-old me, we said, like our arms, we're in much better shape than she got rid of her gym membership because we do better with the strength training my mom does than we were doing
Nice.
our own. So there you go.
That's awesome.
But
That's
it can be
great.
done. It can be done. Even
It
if
can be
somebody,
done.
it can be done. Look
And
for
I
the
love
only
the
person.
multi-generational workout. Like, it's all three of you doing the same stuff and holding each other accountable to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So Sandy, I did a little research prior to this episode because I was curious about happiness. And I found a happiness curve, and it was, in terms of physical appearance, people are least happy from 55 to 59.
This is
And
physical appearance.
this is physical appearance, which I will say probably from 55 to 59 is kind of when there are things
Insert
that are happening that you just can't control. I
that thing
know,
right
exactly.
here,
And
the
I think
wrinkles
about my
right
neck.
here, the neck. How
Yeah.
about the legs? Like I used to love my legs, and they have this
Yeah.
skin loss that's like elasticity. And my mom
Yeah.
told me that would happen. I thought, oh no, my legs are good. All those running. Oh no.
No, I know, that's exactly.
And you
So
can't bring it back.
I read this and I was like, yep, I completely understand that. And then, but most people reach happiness after age 70, which I thought, so there's this huge
I love that
dip.
actually.
Overall happiness actually peaks at two different points, according to the data. Once at age 23 and again at 69. People reported the lowest levels of happiness in their mid 50s.
I feel like I'm a very happy person, but from an appearance standpoint, it's been an adjustment.
Right. I think there's an adjustment, and you got to come to acceptance,
Yep.
and then that's probably where happiness comes from after that.
But in
But
appearance, it is a little bit of a 2x4 to the head in your 50s because some things really do change.
right, totally. Yes, they do. Um, what and also what happens in the 50s is you start seeing your retirement time possibly,
Mhm.
and so the financial worries probably, if you're not in a good place, it probably hit really hard at that moment because you're like, oh, I'm only 15 years away. I'm getting closer and closer to retirement. And if you have any financial concerns, or if you have any health concerns, or just it probably is. And like for me, my dad passed away when he was 60, and very unexpectedly, not illness. So ever since I was 50, when I turned 50, it was a light bulb moment for me of, hmm, I could possibly only have 10 more years. And, who knows what's going to happen. But that really, that mortality, it was like, oh, I'm mortal, and this could come to an end sooner than what I thought, with what I was thinking,
Right.
and that has really shifted my thinking in my 50s for sure. And my sister thinks I'm crazy for doing that. But I was like, for me, it's making me appreciate the moment, appreciate the time, and just know that it's not going to last forever. I need to make the most of this.
Right. Right. And Garrett and I, our big thing recently is talking about, because he's a couple years older than me. Let's see. Yes, he just turned 55, right? And I just turned 53. But our big thing is to travel a lot now while we still feel really good, and
Yeah.
really take that all in and do that. Like we both have been thinking about that a lot. Like, hey, we can do strenuous hikes and there isn't much we can't do. Um, Back to the body being a vessel, and we know that there's only so much mileage, that little by little we know that some things are going to turn around, we can replace them with others, but there's not too much we're restricted on right now. So
Right.
if we're going to go to Hawaii and really spend a good couple of weeks, and for us that would mean some really great hikes and a lot of strenuous things, that would
Yeah.
be really good.
Yeah.
um, One thing
Yeah.
that's interesting, Amy, that I'm thinking about as we're talking is, so we're talking about our parents, and most people listening to us, they're going to be thinking about their own parents, what have you. My aunt has a lot of siblings and me by default, but no kids. But what about the neighbor or the person, and this is where I have a real soft heart, that doesn't have anybody, and the people that don't have that support system, whether their family lives far away, I think everybody tries to be cognizant of that. I remember as a kid, I lived in a small town, and we had the traditional nursing home, and the nursing home was pretty close to the schools. And a big one thing that was really big was adoptive grandparents. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. I loved it. I just always loved going to the nursing home. Some people, their hearts go to puppies and babies, and I love puppies and babies, but I have always really had a good rapport with older people. But I remember, I think back, and it's like that was really meaningful for the people in the nursing home, because a lot of people didn't have family and they were there, and they loved having these adoptive grandkids. And do they do things like that anymore? Do I think people are so busy with their lives. Are people paying attention? I guess I would challenge everyone to look at your neighbors, look at the people around you, take the time to maybe a old family friend that's now in a nursing home, is look for the people who aren't in your circle and do your part to give them that dignity. I'm sure the people that are working at, whether it be the homes or the services they get, are helping them, but sometimes unpaid interactions are a little bit even more meaningful than those that are paid to take care of them. And
Right.
because there is an aging generation that don't necessarily have someone there checking on them every day.
Right. And that's a good point. I don't know that my kids ever had the opportunity to have adoptive grandparents at a nursing home. And I think I don't know that I had that much of a relationship, but I do remember when I was younger, we used to visit nursing homes all the time through Girl Scouts and stuff like that, and go do crafts with them, um, and had a little bit of a relationship.
One thing, my oldest, Zachary, when he was in high school, they had to do senior, or no, they had to do ongoing community service. And the one that he will talk about that I remember very well is and it was kind of a random thing. It's because I had a friend that was at this assisted living. He asked the assisted living manager what he could do to help out, thinking, usually they'd have them do something in the kitchen or organize a shelf, or especially boys, carry out cans. You know what they had him do? They had him interview one of the residents for their next newsletter, and he interviewed him on his World War I experience. And the man
Yes.
came to tears, and Zachary, who's not a crier, was near tears. And he having that high school boy interview this man, and they wrote the story, and I thought brilliant of that manager to give him the
Right.
job to interview the man. And they both, back to that valued and that dignity, and that story was in the newsletter, and everybody wants their story to be heard. That's the other thing, is all of us love to talk about ourselves. And when you're older and you've had this life, you want your life to have meaning, right? You want to share that meaning with other people. And that was just a beautiful moment. And I thought, but it's one of those things, we get caught up in more things. I thought, oh, I got to make sure the other boys do this, or we should spend more time. And I don't know if we did somewhat. We did different projects, or we showed up on Easter and gave gifts, but then we got caught up in life.
So I love the sharing the story and asking to hear the stories, because one of my aunts, she's really good at sharing the stories of childhood, of our grandparents. She just loves to tell the stories, and she's kind of the family historian. She tells stories that she heard from them, and
Love it.
she's great. But one of the things that one of her children had to do in middle school or high school, I don't remember, was interview a grandparent.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually interviewed our great grandparents. So one of my cousins interviewed our great grandparents, and she had it on cassette. And this was long distance. I think it was possibly over the phone. I don't remember, because they were not in the same city. We had a family reunion a couple of years ago, and my aunt brought that tape as part of her family history for everybody to be looking through and listening. And we got to listen to the stories of my great grandparents. And that was such a gift to hear their voices, hear their stories, and the reunion was great because we were just digging into all the stories of all of our older family members, and my kids were mesmerized. I was mesmerized. It was such a fun thing. So that storytelling, family reunions, pulling them all together and letting them tell their stories, I think are really ways to good ways to honor
And I do
their.
find, Amy, that if in a situation, different loved ones that are getting older, uh, one thing that does naturally happen is the less things we have to do, the older we get with other anxiety, is some of our bad traits might peak out more. They're not as hidden because
Oh
they're
yeah,
a
yeah,
little bit more apparent, whether it be bossiness, whether it be, just think about, we all have bad traits, but they can kind of
yeah.
get covered up because there's other things and other dialogue. And, but they kind of they get a little bit more highlighted. I have found that if, oh, a situation or a conversation is going a little bit sideways, that it's not a manipulation, but I might even ask, well, where did you come up with that opinion? Is it some experience? And if they start talking about where they came up, with their experience that molded that, or tell me more about your military history. But the minute we start and talk about their life, their background, I'm understanding more, and it kind of takes that edge off a little bit. It's probably the best uh, I'd use the word diversion because I'm trying to get to something it's always a positive experience to go through that. I learned something. They are remembering something that's meaningful to them typically, or an experience that shaped them that they want to
Yeah.
share. And when all else fails, it's like, let's just go back and talk about something or talk about the good old days. And it,
Yeah.
it's a interesting having the third generation then say, really, is that how that was like? Or, wow, you can read it in books, but to hear a story back to yours from directly from the family member is powerful.
Right. And I was talking to my mom about this. Um, and she was talking about how she's sorry, I'm moving my
You're
computer
fine.
around because the sun is it's hot in Las Vegas. um, uh, but she was talking about she's noticed that people who were narrow minded when they were younger get more narrow minded as they age. I was like, isn't that interesting? Yeah. So, another thing that I found that I was like, oh, isn't this funny? But it's some aging wisdom. And it says, the kinder you are to them, the longer they last. And that would be your knees, your bank account, your skin, your
Uh,
husband, etc. So as you age, the
I
kinder
love
you are to yourself, the longer things are going to last. I know I read that. I was like, well, isn't that truth?
that.
But, we don't recognize that in our 20s, 30s, 40s, but probably in our 50s, we start to recognize, okay, I need to start being kinder to my knees. I need to start being kinder to my feet. I need to start, that's when we start realizing we got to be kinder to ourselves.
Especially when we see those things like skin
Yeah.
that don't have reversing. Yeah, I've got my rodent and fields fix, and it does help. But it's like my friend Chrissy and I always say: is it because we get into that new routine that
Yeah. Yeah.
that we feel like we're doing something? Is it as psychological as Garrett tells me it does help? But well, I don't know. I think
Yeah.
genetics plays about as much of a role. So, and the sun.
Oh, completely. Yeah. In the sun. The sun.
Okay.
All right. Let's get into some questions. Yes, we've got some really good ones today. Our first question is, how can we deploy dignity when our loved one is in physical danger and strongly disagrees with the decision to protect them?
I think it
Yeah, this
depends
is a
on
hard
the
one.
decision. I think it depends on how much physical danger, right? Like, is
Right.
it we don't want them dating because they're going to get a sexually transmitted disease, or is it um,
Yeah, I love that.
like or is it because they're going to drive their car and they just ran into the bank drive through last week? I think no
Right.
matter what, and then stop me. I mean, I think no matter what you use dignity, you have to make the right decision. Do you need to me, it's number one, do you need to decide for them, like the car, or do you need to walk away and let them make their own decision? And either one, you deal with it with dignity with them. Don't talk at them. You just plainly, treat them like the person. And even if it's back to the STD or the girlfriend, boyfriend, or what have you, you can tell them how you feel, but let them make the decision. If the physical danger is their choice and not that high, medical marijuana, I don't know, you have to
Right.
weigh what the
Yeah.
decision is. Is it putting other people in physical danger? What do you think?
Is it putting other people at risk? Yes. And so there's a couple, I think about the driving. The driving is definitely putting other people in danger, but that's probably one of the biggest or hardest conversations because that's a huge loss of independence.
Mhm.
Um, but what you mentioned earlier with one of your friends, having those conversations early with her parents because of what she was going through with her grandparents or her grandmother is, what's the data we're going to use to make this decision possibly? So before it's a problem, identifying what's the data that will determine when you're going to stop driving or, things like that piece. But I think of my father-in-law has Alzheimer's. And that's a completely different issue because he's young, completely capable. He can drive, or well, he could. He's not at that point anymore. But, we were worried about him getting lost because one time he did get lost. And it was just like, okay, we can't let him drive anymore because he's going to get lost. And so that's there's that piece of it too, of keeping them safe, even though they could be driving safely. It's just, we don't want to lose them.
Right.
But the
Never
conversation,
easy, never easy.
not easy, but I do think the conversations have to start super early. They can't start in their 70s and 80s, when something has to happen. The conversations have to happen way beyond that, before that. Um, the next question is there a reckoning we have about our physical capabilities and looks? Um, so I think so. This happened to me this summer. We were at someone's lake house and they were skiing. People were skiing, and I grew up skiing, and I remember slalom skiing, but I haven't skied for about 20 years. And I remember how hard it was to learn how to slalom ski. And so I didn't try it because I was like, yeah, I think I'm past the point of doing that. I was like, I don't know if I could do that. So to me, it was a little bit of a reckoning of, I think my skiing days have passed. So that was interesting.
I tell you, mine is with running, because now I'm having some knee problems again. And I'm like, I really don't want to have surgery, Amy. And I can get
Yeah,
by with a brace because it has to do with my ACL. I've already had surgery. And I don't need to do extreme things. Like, I know I'll be able to ski on it and enjoy the blues. And I'm good with that, because the offset of having such a bad knee injury to re injure it, to not be able to do anything at all, or go through that rehab process, I don't want to do
right.
it right now. And so because of that, I'm like, I'm fine saying, you know what? I, so when I run, Amy, it's almost embarrassing to say this, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to put it out there. So I used to, I've run my whole life. I think we still have one of the records, we do, for medley relay in my high school from the state track meet. But I do half marathons with the goal of being under 8-minute miles. And again, not that I was winning anything. Amy, if I do under 12-minute miles, I call it, I don't run, I shuffle. I am more than happy with that. Yesterday for a half a mile, I said I'm gonna do as fast as I could. And it was like a 10-minute something mile. And I was so thrilled with myself. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Sandy, you were running marathons. Every run was at least 5 to 7 miles. And now you run 2 miles at a time. You're happy with 12-minute miles. Of course, I have the dog with me, but
Yeah,
I accept that. And I don't want to run too much because of my knees. I'm happy I can still do it because it's something I enjoy, but I'm not aiming to get back to those days. I don't want to do a half marathon again. I'm good with 2 miles, maybe 5 if I want to run with my friends, but I have reckoned with my physical capabilities and I'm good with that. It was a little tough in the beginning because I thought, oh my gosh, I've gotten so bad. It's a taxing sport. There's a reason people stop running and they take up swimming and biking.
right. Very true. And I think the reckoning just comes with the self-acceptance of, I'm still moving, I'm still doing other things.
My
And
parents are the most fit people I know, Amy. They
yeah,
and they walk. That's what they do, is they walk. And my mom does strength. They've done this their whole life. They are the most fit older people I know that I would ever want to be. And I have to remind myself that it's like, they don't go out and kill themselves on a stair stepper, or they consistently, and they walk good. They push themselves, they walk, they're very consistent with it. They're very diligent depending on the weather. And they are the most fit people I know. So I'm okay. I don't have to go run until I'm ready to throw up. I'm good.
you're good. That's good.
I'm good.
Okay, final discussion question. What's the real in this situation and what's the ideal? So let's start with the real in the situation.
We're getting old, or
Yeah,
people age. You can't stop aging. You can't stop yourself from dying.
right. I completely agree. That's exactly what I was going to
And
say
death,
is the real.
death shouldn't be something we can't talk about because it's real. It's it should be okay to talk about death, to talk about aging, because they're both real. Nobody likes them, but we can't pretend they're not happening.
Right. That's a good one. We can't pretend it's not going to happen to us because it is.
It's going to happen
And
at
then
opportune times, because when we're the sandwich, now we're better, but it might happen when you don't have time for it. And when your kids are a lot of work, or you're in between jobs and all of a sudden your parent is sick, your neighbor needs help, but you have to know that you can't control everything in your life. And sometimes you just have to say, in order to give that person dignity, in the long run, what I'm worried about today is going to be lesser important than helping them out in what they're dealing with aging.
right, right. And what's the ideal in this situation? And to me, the ideal is celebrating the moments, celebrating the conversation, celebrating the things you can do, and just continuing to do it and being thankful for that stuff because you know once once you get to our age, you've seen people pass away. We've lost people that were younger and older, and so just being thankful
Mhm.
being here,
I totally agree. Being thankful, having the hard conversations early,
right?
taking a breath, and rather than, yeah, the ideal is, even when things are stressful, take the time to think past the doctor and think about your loved one who is the patient, having the
Right.
hard conversations, recognizing what's important to give them dignity. And, I was going to mention earlier that, remember the movie Cocoon?
Yeah.
Cocoon it was a nursing home, and I think some pods ended up in the swimming pool, and ended up being the Fountain of Youth. It was so, they all got new bodies back and they were able to go back, and it was a beautiful movie. And if you can give those that are aging some cocoon moments, whether it's in explaining about something very joyous in their life or the good old days. My mom and her sisters always say, "Oh, I really love talking about the good old days," or a story,
Hello.
or even like an activity that they can't do it 100%, but let them be cocoon once in a while, Let them have
Right.
cocoon moments. Give them their own fountain of youth as much as you can.
Cocoon moments. I love that. And the driving Miss Norma. I love that because letting them decide their path is
Right?
good. All right, wrap question.
Rep.
What are you grateful for this week?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay, so I had a serendipity moment yesterday, and it's something that
Aw.
what I tell you I'm grateful for is I'm grateful for my friendships with people. So I love to write, and I've been encouraged. I like to do some master classes, and I've done some with Margaret Atwood and another lady. And one thing is, they really encourage not just writing like on computer, but to journal every day. So yesterday my exercise was, and this was something I made up myself. I thought, you know what? There's some content I want for some speaking and some presentations and some other writing about women building women up. And so I listed 10 friendships that were meaningful to me, just the 10 that really just, and then I wrote all the reasons why and circled the key words. But here, Amy, so it made me very grateful. That day, 3 of the women, none of whom I've had any contact with in the last, because I don't live, they were all Omaha women that I haven't had contact with in at least 3 months. I got random texts from each one of them.
Oh my gosh, I
Isn't that
love that.
crazy? I said, and just for each one a random reason, but it had to do with our friendship. Like one was actually, I binge listened to your podcasts. I love them, tell Amy, I think it's great. But just the fact that I did that exercise that morning, and 3 out of the 10 women, of whom I have not had contact with, reached out to me. I'm like, serendipity. that's why those, there's a reason for all of that. So I am grateful for that. I'm grateful for my friendship.
That is awesome. I love that. I'm always a true believer in the energy that we put out there,
Right.
that, you know, that it comes back to us. And so anyway, that's a little woo woo woo.
Ooh,
I
yeah.
love that.
And it's not
Woo
even
woo.
happy hour, Amy. We're just going from coffee to water here.
Right. I so my gratitude is very simple. I'm grateful for the time I get to spend with my mom this week. I haven't seen her since December because of all the COVID stuff and traveling here. I was very careful before I came to limit exposure to people so that, I didn't bring anything to her and that we could enjoy our time. And it's
Right.
been wonderful. It's just been really nice. We've had a
And I'm
lot of time.
enjoying the hummingbirds behind you too. I have
Are
to,
there hummingbirds behind me? I know that feeder is great. We were sitting out here last night and watching the moonrise and people walking on the golf course and the hummingbirds. There was one, we called him Scruffy because he looked a little scruffy, but he was cute.
they're a good spirit animal. We have hummingbirds here too. My aunt, the same aunt, the elderly one, I have a book of what birds represent when they come into your life or when they're busy. So I'm going to look that up and I will post that.
Yeah, let me
I will
know.
let you know.
Well, Sandy, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm just going to say I always enjoy it. I always look forward to digging into these concepts, and aging with dignity is definitely something, especially in this time of COVID, honoring those people that are at more risk than everybody else, and giving them dignity. I love that.
And
So thank you.
it applies to us. Thank you, Amy. And it applies to us, and it applies to us thinking outside of ourselves. And I love a reminder of how to continue. It's easier to think about yourself and it's harder to think outside yourself. And now you've motivated me. It's like, when are we going to come to that time when I can physically visit my parents again? But I do have silver sneakers this afternoon. So
I know, yeah. Good.
on that
Enjoy your
note,
first.
until next week, have fun
Thank
in
you.
Las Vegas. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.